Ladies and gentlemen, listen closely. Daughter, let me ask you something. How many times have you swallowed your truth just to keep the peace? How many times have you forced a yes out of your mouth while your spirit was screaming no? How many times have you abandoned yourself just to earn approval from people who couldn't even recognize your worth? Hear me when I say this. Every woman becomes dangerous, unstoppable, and unshakable the moment she finally chooses herself. Not when she gets a ring. Not when someone finally says, "I'm proud of you." But in that quiet moment when she stands in front of the mirror, tears burning, scars visible, and whispers, "I'm done waiting, I choose me." And you watch this speech till the end, because if you've ever felt lost, broken, or unworthy, by the time it ends you'll remember exactly who you are. A woman's strength doesn't begin when the world applauds her. It begins in the private, painful instant when she finally sees herself. When she understands that self-respect isn't just about drawing lines. It's about defining her identity. It's understanding she was never meant to shrink for someone else's comfort or mold herself into anyone's expectations. Self-respect isn't loud, but it is immovable. It speaks through silence, through decisions, through actions, and through the quiet power of walking away from anything that wounds her spirit. When a woman chooses self-respect over acceptance, something shifts inside her. She no longer bends for attention, chases validation, or clings to compliments, because she has touched a deeper truth. The most powerful approval is the one she gives herself. She becomes more selective, not out of pride, but out of evolution. She realizes that not everyone deserves access to her energy, her time, or her heart. And that realization isn't just wisdom. It's power. Self-respect is the moment she stops trying to prove her worth. It's when she refuses to explain why she said no, why she left, why she stayed silent, or why she chose a different direction. She no longer feels the need to make herself smaller for people who can't handle her full presence. She isn't rude. She isn't distant. She is rooted, grounded, certain. She understands that kindness does not mean she must be stepped on, that generosity does not mean she must be used, and that patience does not mean she must be taken for granted. There is something sacred about a woman who knows what she deserves and refuses to negotiate it. And this power does not rise from pain alone. It rises from reflection, from choosing to learn instead of lashing out, from choosing to grow instead of grovel, from gathering every broken piece of herself and saying, "I will rebuild me," even if no one applauds. That level of self-respect turns a soft woman into a force that cannot be shaken. In a world that constantly pushes women to prove themselves, to perform, to be agreeable, likable, flexible, self-respect becomes rebellion. Not a loud rebellion, but a quiet, steady, grounded one. The kind that declares, "I will no longer audition for places I was not meant to belong." It's a refusal to be used, dismissed, or tolerated. It is the beginning of alignment, the beginning of peace, the beginning of true power. When a woman finally respects herself, her walk changes. Her presence changes. Her silence becomes sharper than words. People feel it. Some will fear it. Some will admire it. But no one will be able to ignore it, because that kind of presence cannot be faked. It is earned. Earned through tears, earned through loneliness, earned through the courage of letting go of what she once believed she needed to survive. And when she rises on the other side, she isn't bitter. She's better. She isn't colder. She's wiser. She no longer chases anyone. She attracts the right ones by simply being who she is. And here's the truth. Self-respect doesn't mean a woman has solved every part of her life. It doesn't mean she never doubts or struggles. What it means is that she refuses to abandon herself again. She refuses to hand her worth to someone else's judgment. It means she stands in her truth, even when her voice trembles. It means she holds herself to higher standards, not for perfection, but for alignment. That woman understands the real glow-up isn't outside. It's within. It's in how she responds instead of reacts. It's in how she stops arguing and begins walking away. It's in how she spends more time in peace and less time in chaos. It's in how she guards her energy like it's sacred, because it is. She no longer fights for closure. She creates it. She no longer waits for permission. She gives it to herself. This is what self-respect looks like at its highest point. Self-respect transforms how she loves too. She no longer loves from emptiness. She loves from fullness. She isn't moved by words. She studies patterns. She isn't swayed by charm. She observes consistency. And if someone cannot meet her with the same depth, she doesn't force it. She lets it fall away, not from anger, but from clarity. Because a woman with self-respect knows that letting go isn't loss. It's liberation. She knows that anything costing her peace is already too expensive. She knows her energy is currency, and she spends it with intention. She knows time isn't just passing, it's teaching. And with each year, each month, each moment, she chooses herself. She grows into the woman she was always meant to become. She no longer asks, "What do they think of me?" The only question she asks is, "Does this align with who I am?" And that question becomes the blueprint for a life built on integrity, not insecurity. In every season, whether she's rising or rebuilding, surrounded by love or walking alone, her power never leaves her, because it comes from within. Anchored, steady, unshaken, self-respect is not just the root of a woman's strength. It is the evidence that she knows who she is, and no one can take that from her. Choosing herself is not rebellion. It's survival. It's the moment she stops waiting for someone to save her, love her, heal her, or validate her. It's the moment she understands no one is coming, and that her power has been inside her all along. The world may call it selfish, but it is self-preservation. It is reclaiming her life, her voice, and her energy from all the places she left it behind. It is the decision to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't offer her a bandage. When a woman chooses herself, she breaks free from the cycles that once held her down. Cycles of pleasing, of overgiving, of emotional neglect. She sees that every time she abandoned herself for others, she drifted further from her true path. Survival doesn't always look strong on the outside. Sometimes it's simply walking away when your spirit is exhausted from fighting battles that were never yours. Sometimes it's choosing silence over defending yourself to people who never cared to understand. This choice is quiet, but revolutionary. It shifts everything. She begins seeing through masks, through empty promises, through the patterns that once kept her trapped. She no longer lets guilt chain her to places where she's merely tolerated instead of celebrated. She no longer mistakes being needed for being loved. She understands that if her value appears only when she's useful, that isn't love, it's convenience. Prioritizing herself means realizing that healing must come before helping, that her mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being are not luxuries, but essential foundations. She no longer feels obligated to explain why she needs space, why she chooses solitude, or why she stopped showing up for people who never once showed up for her. That explanation becomes unnecessary the moment she understands the only person she must answer to is herself. This isn't about cutting people off. It's about choosing wholeness over old habits. It's recognizing she deserves love that doesn't drain her, peace that doesn't require permission, and clarity that doesn't confuse her. She comes to understand that real strength isn't measured by what she carries, but by what she finally sets down. The beauty of choosing herself is that it sends a ripple into every part of her life. Her relationships shift because she no longer accepts half-efforts, excuses, or crumbs disguised as affection. She no longer confuses consistency with loyalty or presence with purpose. She stops listening to words alone. She watches behavior and trusts her intuition. And when something feels wrong, She doesn't argue with it. She honors it. Choosing yourself is survival, because without it, you slowly disappear. You silence your truth just to keep the peace. You hide your feelings to avoid conflict. You shrink yourself so others feel comfortable. And one day, you wake up wondering how you became a stranger in your own life. That realization, that painful awakening, is often the moment a woman finally says no more. And from that moment she shifts. Her solitude becomes her sanctuary. Her alone time becomes her alignment. She rebuilds herself from within. No witnesses, no applause, only intention. She chooses habits that feed her spirit, not numb her wounds. She surrounds herself with people who see her, not use her. She starts living in a way that no longer betrays her inner truth. This journey isn't glamorous. It isn't always graceful. At times it's lonely, chaotic, and unclear. But it's necessary, because when a woman chooses herself, she doesn't just survive, she evolves. She stops pretending. She stops performing. She starts living. And what the world may call selfish, she now calls sacred, because anything that costs her peace, self-worth, or sanity is far too expensive. She understands that love without respect is manipulation, that connection without honesty is attachment, and that presence without intention is only noise. She wants more than company. She wants depth. And that begins with offering it to herself first. So she learns to sit with her emotions, to feel her pain rather than fear it, to forgive herself for staying too long, giving too much, or dimming her light for people who never earned it. In that space, she learns to trust herself again. She begins to love herself in a way no one else ever could. Not because she believes she's above anyone, but because she finally recognizes she was never beneath them. That understanding, that steady and unshakable self-awareness, is what carries her through storms, through silence, through seasons of uncertainty. Because even in chaos, she knows one truth: she has herself. And that is enough. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. It's clarity. It's freedom. It's the beginning of a life that honors the woman she always was, beneath all the fear, conditioning, and compromise. And once she tastes that freedom, she never returns to the old version of living. The world may not applaud quiet strength. It often praises the loud, the visible, the ones chasing attention. But there is something far more commanding about a woman who walks away from what no longer serves her, without noise, without drama, without seeking recognition. The kind of woman who leaves not because she was weak, but because she finally understood her peace was worth more than the situation she was trying to survive. That is where real power begins. It isn't measured by how much she can endure, but by what she refuses to accept anymore. There is a quiet fire in her, not one fueled by revenge, but one that burns the bridges leading back to disrespect. She doesn't raise her voice. She raises her standards. She doesn't announce her departure. She simply stops returning to places that no longer align with who she is becoming. And the world notices. Not because she said anything, but because her absence echoes louder than her presence ever did in those environments. A woman who walks away from toxicity, manipulation, or mediocrity never loses. She gains. She gains energy, clarity, and the return of her self-worth. When she chooses peace over proving herself, silence over conflict, and distance over disrespect, she redefines what power means. Because walking away is not defeat. It's mastery. Mastery over her emotions, mastery over her reactions, mastery over her life. Her strength doesn't come from pretending she's unbothered. It comes from surviving doubt, betrayal, and heartbreak, and emerging clearer, not colder. She remembers the nights she questioned her worth, the days she tried explaining herself to people who never cared to understand, the moments she poured love into spaces that only drained her. That woman is done bleeding for those who never learned how to stop cutting. And when she leaves, she doesn't look back. Not because she lacks compassion, but because she finally has compassion for herself. Her focus shifts from fixing others to healing herself, from being understood to honoring her boundaries, from being chosen to choosing wisely. She no longer gives space to those who bring confusion, chaos, or criticism. Her space becomes sacred. Her time becomes precious. Her energy becomes selective. This kind of woman doesn't chase closure. She creates it. She doesn't debate her worth. She embodies it. She knows that those who value her will never ask her to shrink, suffer, or settle. And those who don't, they're free to leave. Not because she's bitter, but because she's better. Better at protecting her peace. Better at honoring her purpose. Better at standing in her power. The world may misunderstand her silence, but that no longer concerns her. Her mission isn't to be understood. It's to be whole, aligned, and rooted in a life that reflects her strength and wisdom. This kind of woman commands respect without demanding anything. Her actions speak. Her boundaries are clear. Her presence is undeniable. She doesn't need to announce her healing. You feel it when she enters the room. She doesn't need to prove her worth. You see it in how she refuses to beg for love, attention, or loyalty. She knows now that anything forced is not meant for her. Anything that must be chased will eventually run. What's meant for her will feel right, move with ease, and honor her fully. And even when others question why she walked away, she doesn't explain. Because true peace needs no explanation. It speaks on its own. She no longer needs the final word, no longer needs to prove her point. Her peace outweighs the desire to win. Her growth outweighs her pride, and her future holds more sacredness than her past ever could. It's not about pretending nothing touches her. It's about being grounded enough to know what deserves her energy and what does not. Her strength becomes the quiet power of discernment, knowing when to stay, when to walk away, and when the line between effort and disrespect has been crossed. She recognizes the difference between compromise and self-betrayal, and she refuses to abandon herself ever again. She has learned that love without respect is only attachment, that presence without care is merely convenience, and that words without action are empty sound. So she protects her soul with intention. She trusts her intuition without hesitation. She honors her feelings without apology, and in doing so, she becomes untouchable, not because she is distant, but because no one can manipulate her into forgetting her worth again. The woman who walks away isn't weakened, she is awakened. She understands now that true strength is not clinging tightly, but releasing gracefully, quietly, and powerfully. She doesn't walk away because she is broken. She walks away because she is finally whole. And from that wholeness she builds, she grows, she thrives, she rises. The world will try to test this strength, try to pull her back into an outdated version of herself, but she is done explaining her evolution. She will no longer shrink so others can stay comfortable. She will no longer remain in places that require her to dim her light. Because the most dangerous woman is not the one who demands to be seen. It is the one who finally sees herself. And when she steps away from anything that does not honor that vision, she becomes unstoppable. Loneliness is often misunderstood. People mistake it for emptiness, a void meant to be filled quickly with noise, distractions, or company. But for a woman who is evolving, loneliness becomes something sacred. It becomes a quiet room where she is untouched by expectations, untouched by old identities, untouched by the roles she once played for acceptance. In that stillness, she begins to hear the only voice that truly matters, her own. Choosing solitude is not escape, it is discovery. It is where she sheds the weight of who the world told her to be. It is where she stops performing and starts asking the deeper question, who am I when no one is watching? That truth doesn't come from outside. It rises from within. Slowly, honestly, sometimes painfully, but always real. In solitude, she finally sees the raw, unfiltered version of herself, the woman shaped by scars and wisdom. The woman hurt but unbroken. The woman learning that she does not need to be surrounded to feel seen or validated to feel valued. And in this quiet space, she realizes that being misunderstood by others means nothing if she finally understands herself. This is where she begins to rewrite her story. She is no longer waiting to be chosen or saved. She becomes the author, the narrator, and the lead. Her solitude isn't a punishment. It is preparation. It is where her thoughts settle, her vision clears, and her spirit strengthens. It is where she becomes the woman who no longer fears walking away, because she finally knows where she is going. It's in this solitude that she learns silence is not absence. It is presence, awareness, depth. Aloneness teaches her patience. She no longer rushes to fill empty spaces, no longer fears the quiet. She embraces it, because in that quiet she meets the one connection deeper than any relationship ever offered, herself. And the more she returns to that inner space, the less she tolerates anything that tries to pull her away from it. She becomes whole again, not through others, but through truth, through honest reflection, through facing the uncomfortable realities she once buried beneath noise and busyness. She confronts her insecurities, meets her fears head-on, and begins to transform, not because someone rescued her, but because she chose to face herself with compassion and courage. The world will tell her that being alone means something is missing, that without the constant presence of friends, lovers, or attention, she must be lacking something. But what they fail to understand is that this woman isn't missing anything. She's rebuilding everything. Rebuilding her mindset, her boundaries, her peace, her confidence. This isn't loneliness, this is construction, elevation, rebirth. And in this rebuilding, she sharpens her discernment. She no longer lets everyone in, not out of coldness but clarity. She values her energy differently. She knows the difference between being needed and being respected, between being wanted and being appreciated. She refuses chaos just to avoid silence, because now silence is where she grows. Silence is where she thrives. She starts to see that the love she sought outside was always meant to begin within. She nurtures herself in ways she never imagined. She becomes her own peace, her own protector, her own provider. And this self-reliance doesn't harden her, it completes her. It softens her where it matters, strengthens her where it's needed, and that balance makes her untouchable. The wisdom born in solitude cannot be learned in crowds. It shows in how she carries herself, no longer eager to explain, defend, or impress. She doesn't just enter a room, she arrives with intention. She knows exactly what she brings, and if no one recognizes it, she's unafraid to stand alone. It isn't pride, it's presence. Solitude becomes her shield. It protects her from settling, from slipping back into patterns she has outgrown, from chasing people who never had the capacity for her depth. She no longer begs to be understood, no longer accepts partial love or inconsistent effort. Her solitude has shown her what true connection feels like. Connection with herself, and anything that threatens that is dismissed with quiet certainty. When she steps back into the world, she is not who she was. She walks with a calm that doesn't seek attention, a confidence that doesn't need validation, a peace that doesn't shake under pressure. Because in her time alone, she built a foundation no one can take from her. And upon that foundation, her new life begins. This kind of power doesn't make noise. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't seek applause. It simply exists steady and rooted, moving through her, speaking for her without a single word. A woman who has mastered her solitude cannot be manipulated, cannot be rushed, cannot be distracted. She no longer looks for the world to complete her. She is full. She is focused. She is free. She cannot lead her life while begging to be chosen. The moment she seeks approval to feel worthy, she gives away her power piece by piece. Every time she waits to be valued, she delays becoming her truest self. She cannot walk in purpose while holding out her hand for someone else's permission. The world teaches women to be agreeable, to stay quiet, to earn love through sacrifice, to prove their worth by being everything to everyone. Yet the more she tries to be chosen, the more she forgets that she already holds the authority to choose herself. Real leadership begins with self-selection. A woman steps into power when she stops auditioning for roles she never wanted, when she walks away from tables where she is only tolerated, not respected. She begins to lead the moment. She no longer tries to be someone's maybe and becomes her own always. She understands that the need to be chosen is rooted in fear. The fear of being alone, of being unseen, of being unworthy. But once she replaces fear with clarity, she stops seeking acceptance from others and begins accepting herself. And when that truth settles, everything shifts, her energy changes. She no longer waits for a call, a text, a gesture to feel valued. She stops measuring her worth by who stays. She realizes she is not here to be liked. She is here to live aligned. And alignment never requires approval. It requires courage. The courage to stand alone if she must. The courage to leave comfort and choose growth. The courage to lead rather than follow. She understands she cannot lead her life from the back seat. She cannot build a future while begging someone to love her, see her, or choose her. Leadership starts with owning who she is. It begins in the decision to stop watering what has already died. Relationships, friendships, environments that drain her spirit. It's in the way she says no without guilt, walks away without explanation, and chooses peace over performance. And when she reclaims that kind of power, she becomes unshakable. Not because everything is perfect, but because she refuses to betray herself for belonging. Begging to be chosen creates a cycle of dependence, a loop that ties her value to other people's reactions. That loop keeps her small. She doubts herself, questions her intuition, overthinks, over-apologizes, overextends. But the moment she breaks that loop, when she finally sees she was never meant to chase but to align, she becomes unstoppable. Her power isn't in being everything to everyone. Her power is in being fully herself, with or without approval. When she stops seeking to be chosen, she stops waiting for closure. She no longer needs explanations for what didn't work. She shifts her focus inward, toward healing, growth, and peace. And from that space, she begins to lead her life with intention. She builds boundaries not to push others away, but to protect her energy. She stops feeling guilty for prioritizing her well-being. She understands that leadership does not mean doing it all. It means doing what matters, doing what aligns, doing it without apology. There is a profound shift when she moves from desperation to discernment, when she stops asking, "Will they pick me?" and begins declaring, "I picked me." This declaration does not come from arrogance but from wisdom. Wisdom earned through pain, silence, and years of giving too much and receiving too little. Wisdom that whispers, "I deserve a life that reflects my worth, not my wounds." And when she leads her own life, she attracts differently. She no longer draws in people who wish to control her. She attracts those who respect her. She is no longer impressed by charm. She looks for character. She is no longer moved by potential. She watches patterns. She leads with intention now, with clarity, with purpose, with strength forged through rejection, heartbreak, and self-doubt. She wears her growth like armor, not to keep the world out, but to keep herself whole. The woman who leads her life does not compete. She collaborates. She does not compare. She honors her own path. She does not chase love. She embodies it. And when she walks into a room, she no longer needs to prove anything. Her presence speaks for her. Her presence speaks for itself. Her peace speaks for itself. Her confidence is not loud, yet it is unmistakable. There is a freedom that emerges when she releases the need to be chosen. She no longer molds herself into versions others find convenient. She no longer waits for invitations into rooms she was never meant to enter. She builds her own table. She writes her own script. She leads instead of follows. And through this quiet discipline, she teaches others how to treat her, not through force, but through example. She becomes the standard. She becomes the mirror that reflects what strength, clarity, and self-respect truly look like. She does not only lead her life, she inspires others to lead theirs. You cannot lead while begging. You cannot rise while shrinking. You cannot evolve while waiting. The moment she chooses herself, without hesitation, without apology, is the moment she steps into leadership over her own life. And once she arrives there, she will never again settle for merely being chosen, because she realizes she was never meant to be picked. She was meant to stand. Validation is one of the most dangerous traps a woman can fall into. It begins quietly. A compliment here, approval there, waiting for someone to notice her efforts. Over time, this craving for recognition becomes dependency. Her self-worth begins to fluctuate with how others respond to her. The danger is not in wanting to be acknowledged. It is in building an identity based on how the world reacts. In that place, she becomes a prisoner of perception. She measures her beauty, her value, even her intelligence through the eyes of others. And the moment the applause fades, she begins to doubt her own steps. But eventually, through heartbreak, disappointment, or exhaustion, she realizes that no one is coming to offer her the validation she has been waiting for. And though that realization stings, it also liberates her. Because when she stops depending on external approval, she begins building her life on truth. The truth that she is enough, even when no one says it. The truth that her voice matters, even when it is dismissed. The truth that her presence carries weight, even when it is unacknowledged. Freedom begins when she stops waiting to be seen and starts seeing herself. Self-approval becomes a powerful form of liberation. It is the quiet decision to look in the mirror and think, I am proud of me, even when the world is silent. It is not arrogance. It is clarity. It is knowing who she is without needing confirmation. When the likes don't come in, when messages go unanswered, when applause disappears, she becomes her own audience. She begins living for purpose, not praise, for alignment, not attention. And everything shifts. When she stops chasing validation, she begins creating from a pure place. She makes choices that honor her soul, not her image. She speaks her truth, even when it is unpopular. She dresses for herself. She no longer curates a life to impress others. She builds a life that feels true to her essence. And when she does this, people feel it. Real confidence is magnetic. It does not announce itself. It does not demand a spotlight. It moves quietly and commands respect without asking. This kind of inner approval is not handed to her. It is earned. Earned by sitting with herself through seasons of doubt and refusing to abandon who she is. Earned by walking away from places that made her feel invisible. Earned by honoring her boundaries, her intuition, and her voice even when no one else understands. A woman who approves of herself becomes a force, not because she tries to prove anything, but because she no longer needs to. The validation trap teaches women to shrink, to smile through pain, to agree when disrespected, to remain quiet to keep the peace. But a woman who validates herself stops playing that game. She doesn't lower her voice to be more likable, nor soften her truth just to be accepted. She understands now that the right people will never require her to shrink in order to love her. Living without the hunger for validation means making choices that others may never understand. Choosing rest when the world demands hustle. Choosing distance when attention comes without respect. Choosing no, even when yes would keep the peace. She honors her truth above trends, above expectations, above the fear of being misunderstood. And while this path demands depth, solitude, and unshakable courage, it also gives her a peace no external approval can match. Because the moment a woman learns to validate herself, she stops waiting to be loved properly, waiting to be seen, waiting for someone to confirm her brilliance. She begins living fully, freely, unapologetically, and that inner endorsement becomes her anchor. On days when the world feels distant, when recognition fades, when applause is given elsewhere, she remains grounded. Her confidence wasn't built on noise. It was built in silence, in private victories, in moments she chose herself when no one else did. She becomes her own source, her own light, her own guide. And from that state, she attracts relationships, opportunities, and spaces aligned with her value. She no longer chases love, begs for attention, or bargains with her worth just to fit in. She stands whole on her own, and that wholeness draws the right people toward her. Not for what she gives, but for who she is. A woman who validates herself moves differently. She doesn't compare because her focus is inward. She doesn't compete because what is hers cannot be taken. She doesn't settle because her standards reflect her healing. And she no longer fears being misunderstood because clarity within is worth more than approval outside. Once she approves of herself, once she allows herself to shine, grow, and rise, no one can take that from her. The world may overlook her, judge her, or minimize her. But she is no longer asking for their permission. She carries everything she needs within. That's more than confidence. That's power. And there comes a defining moment when she stops explaining herself, not out of indifference, but out of understanding that her worth is not up for negotiation. She realizes that some will misunderstand her, no matter how clearly she speaks. Some will twist her truth, doubt her intentions, or misuse her vulnerability. So she chooses peace over performance, silence over repetition, clarity over chaos. In that choice, she becomes unstoppable. A woman who no longer explains herself has reached a rare inner certainty. She has nothing to prove and no desire to persuade. She doesn't beg to be understood because she already understands herself. Her power becomes quiet but unshakable, living in her calm, her presence, her simple no without a paragraph of justification. She no longer shrinks to soothe others or edits her truth to fit someone else's expectations. This transformation wasn't sudden. It was shaped through years of over-explaining, defending her feelings, justifying her decisions, and doubting her own voice. She exhausted herself trying to be everything for everyone. Soft enough to be liked, strong enough to be respected, balanced enough to not be judged. Until the truth finally hit her, the only approval she ever truly needed was her own. She becomes selective, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. She knows energy is currency, and not everyone deserves a transaction. She no longer argues where understanding is impossible, nor waters down her truth for those unwilling to hear it. She withdraws quietly, firmly, powerfully, because her silence now speaks louder than all the explanations she once offered. Her boundaries are unspoken, her standards non-negotiable. She doesn't announce her shifts. She moves in alignment, not for approval. She no longer feels the need to display every decision, defend every boundary, or apologize for her evolution. She trusts herself, and that trust becomes a steady, grounded confidence. The kind that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't collapse under pressure. It simply stands. She no longer entertains conversations that drain her spirit. If someone can't see her value, she won't argue for it. She is done convincing people to respect her, to show up consistently, to treat her with the care she already gives to others. Those who understand will meet her where she is. Those who don't are free to walk away. Not because she rejects connection, but because she knows connection without respect is just emotional labor with no return. Every time she explained herself to someone unwilling to listen, she sacrificed clarity. Now she guards that clarity like something sacred, because it is. Her peace is not a negotiation. Her healing is not a debate. Her progress is not a performance. She remembers what it took to reach this version of herself. The silent nights, the broken pieces she rebuilt into boundaries, the pain she alchemized into wisdom. And for that journey, she owes no one an explanation. The woman who stops explaining herself is not cold, she is focused. No longer triggered by opinions that don't serve her peace, no longer shaken by criticism from those who never walked her path. She moves with intention, with purpose, with quiet strength that commands respect without demanding it. She becomes a woman who is felt before she is heard. Her presence shifts rooms, not because she seeks attention, but because she finally honors herself without needing validation. She walks away from misalignment softly but with certainty. Her exit is not emotional, it's necessary. And once she leaves, she doesn't return to justify her departure. Closure is something she gives herself. There is freedom in that. The freedom from needing to be liked, from trying to make sense to those committed to misunderstanding her, from believing her boundaries require explanation to be respected. She understands now that the most powerful women are those who stand firmly in their truth, without seeking permission. She leads with grace but stays grounded. She forgives but refuses to abandon herself again. When she speaks, people listen, because her words carry truth. When she is silent, people still feel her, because silence has become her strength. A woman like this cannot be manipulated, pressured, or guilt-tripped into explaining herself anymore. She knows who she is. She knows what she brings. And she knows her peace is too expensive to waste on justifying her worth to those who never valued it. She no longer seeks understanding, she seeks peace. That is not arrogance, it is maturity, not indifference. It is protection, and once she claims this power, no one can take it away. So if you're listening now, I'm not asking you to become someone new. I'm asking you to return to the woman you buried beneath fear, guilt, and expectations. Uncover her, stand tall, look at yourself and say, I choose me, today, tomorrow, always. Because once you choose yourself, you will never be powerless again.